Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about Java 23 gathering modularity. And let's switch over to my screen here, and this is the release 23, which is a long-term supported release. They do that every 6th release or every 3 years. So this, the last one was 17, the one before that was 11, now we are at 23. So this is a long-term supported release. It will be released in the 17th of September. So it's going into a ramp down phase now where they actually put down everything and say, okay, this is what the release will contain. And because it's now settled and the rest is just testing and see that everything works as they expected it, I can now talk about this release. So let's continue. First off, I would like to talk about this offer. So Coursera has been a sponsor of the channel for a long while, and they actually sent me a really good offer today on my email. And there is two different offers here. One is for the Indian population, and I know that I have a couple of Indian viewers, so I put it in here as well. So they have this Coursera Plus with a bunch of different courses where you can learn everything from Java programming to machine learning and everything in between. Take certificates for different big corporation and so on. So there is a lot in these courses that you can take, and now they give it away for 1 year, a full year, for 7,999 rupees. And these are actually, I think converted to dollars, it's about $95 for a whole year. So that is a super interesting offer. It's 75 off for Indian viewers. But in our case, in the rest of the world, we get at least 40% off. So for $20 per month, we can get the same learning and skills to us. And I have links in the video description where I get an affiliate kickback if you are using those links. So if you want to support the channel and want this package with great courses, then follow my links in the description below. And just a heads up, these offers ends on the 23rd of June 2024. So if you want to take advantage of them, you do it now. And now we're going to talk about JEP 455. And these are primitive types, patterns, instance of, and switches. And it's still a preview. They have been talking about it before, but now it's actually a JEP, so they have a suggestion. And I was actually a little bit blown away that it wasn't a part of the setup already. But now we can have switch statements with these kind of case statements where you have primitive types. You can also have expressions in them and see that you have an int I where the number is larger than 100, for instance, and so on. But you can also have an instance of here. So if I have an integer and I say, is this an instance of a byte? So it's between the value of minus 127 to plus 126, then it's a byte, so it could be easily converted to a byte. And if I write this, then I can continue using that b value as a byte instead. So that's an improvement, an interesting way of using the language. It's still a preview, so there can be changes later on, but I think it's interesting. Next up, we have the JEP 466 class file preview. This is something that is more for people that want to create class files or read class files, modify class files, and so on. So it's not something that I'm going to use. It's interesting that they're working on it. Reflection still works just as fine. They will not remove anything. This is just a way of giving a lower level access in a better API. So if you're interested in this, you can read more about that. Next up, we have Markdown in documentation comments. And this is not a preview. This is just functionality that we get, and then they're going to improve on it. They're going to add more functionality to these comments. And I'm actually sad that it wasn't a preview, because I would like to be a part of this discussion. I'm not really keen on the implementation, to be frank. So here we have it. They have added three slashes before, and then you can write your markdown. So in this case, they mark up this Java util here. We have some, I think it's bold text here. Then we have a list of items here, just using dashes. And then we have links down here, and similar things will be used as well with the Java doc things. They will use @signs and so on in order to use the normal Java doc implementation. In the future, they have planned to update the way you are saying return statements, parameters, and so on, using Markdown instead. So they had a suggestion for that. It's not implemented in this release. Next up, we have JEP 469, the Vector API, the 8th incubator. So I've talked about this so many times by this point, but to reiterate, this is a way to get a clear and concise API that should be platform agnostic and could be reliable runtime compilation and performance on both x86 and on ARM architectures. So it should be working all over the place. It should have a graceful degradation, and the alignments should be with Project Valhalla. So this is something that they are implemented in order to use vectors and do vector multiplication and so on. Very similar to the things that you do in machine learning. But I'm not sure if this API will be used for that, but for other mathematical complications and for instance, image manipulations and so on, this could be really interesting. Next up, we have Steam Gatherers, or Stream Gatherers, JEP 473, the second preview. And they have a couple of examples here. These are pretty interesting. So these are ways of gathering information in a stream of or a flow of data in order to do different things. And in this first example here, they have a gathering with a sliding window. So they will take two elements and then the next two elements, but it will slide over the elements. So first it will check 1 and 2, then it will check 2 and 3, and then 3 and 4, and so on. And with this particular sliding window, you can check if the window is of a size 2, we could check the first element with the second element and see if they are suspicious, and only get out the suspicious element into a list. So that is or the windows out to a list. So every window that is suspicious, we can get out to a list. We can also have this gather with a fixed window of 3, for instance, then you will get these segmented in values of 3. And you can have gather upon gather upon gather. So these are something that you can string together with other implementations. You can have gather, filter, gather, for instance, and so on. So an interesting thing that should be in a streaming interface, of course. Next up, we have JEP 471. And this is just deprecating the memory access method used in unsafe mode for removal. And all these unsafe, this has been something that has been in the platform for a long while. They have been talking about removing more and more unsafe methods. So we will have a more stable programming language. I think this is great, and that they are deprecating things and then removing them later on. So if you are using anything unsafe, just remove them from your code by this point. Then we have 474. This is the ZGC generational mode by default. So this is just going over to using this particular version of our garbage collector. And it has been in the works for a while. It has been in preview and so on. But now it's done, and it's also default. So later on, I will actually compile Java 23 and see if I get more performance out of it. It should be really interesting to check out. Next out, we have the module import declarations preview. So this is a way of importing a package of classes. So now we say that we want to import a bunch of classes or packages of classes, and this is multiple packages. And they have some complications doing this, of course, because you can have have things that are not clear when you're doing it. So if you look here, for instance, we have this I can't say that word, ambiguity. So for instance, in this Java base package, we have the date class, and in the Java SQL class, we have the date class as well, because both util and Java SQL has the date class. So then we will need to specifically tell it that this is the date class we are interested in using later on down here to remove the ambiguity. I'm going to learn to say that word someday. I'm going to work on it. Next up, we have JEP 477. Implicitly declaring classes and instance methods, main methods. I don't think this is a super important thing. This is for the new learners to the environment, and when you're not using an IDE and you just want to write a Java class and you want one main method and something simple. So it's a way to get the first program you write down to 3 lines of code. So this is a very simple program that will be allowed in the future. Void main, print line, hello world. So you have removed all the interesting information around this, that this is a class, this is a public method, and so on. But for somebody that comes new into the programming language, those things might be hard to grok at the moment. And then when they expand their knowledge, you could add these identifiers so they learn more about the language as it goes. So it's a good thing to add, but I don't think that is something I will use. Next up, we have JEP 480, structured concurrency. This is the third preview. I've talked about it a lot. It's pretty much when you have one thing that you want to run and then you want to run another thing at the same time, but both results are required in order to actually return a value. So in this case, we have this handle function. We send something in and we want to return a shutdown on a failure. We will fetch a user and an order, and only when both of those have returned and we have joined this scope, and if it fails, we will throw an exception, of course. But if we can join these scopes, then we can return both values as a response later on. So it's a way of having separated tasks that we fork out and do simultaneously, but that we need the result to come back together as one result. Next up, we have JEP 481, scoped values. This is the third preview. We have talked about this before. This is also something that you could have in a web application. For instance, you set up a scope here with the principal, and then later on in the same request, the same values goes in. And in that case, when you are having the same request, you can use that principal on a whole different place in the code. It's a kind of just static variable that will be available somewhere else, but it's scoped this particular request. Next up, we have JEP 482, flexible constructor bodies. This is something that I have been a bit confused with in the past. I haven't really figured out why this is the case, so I'm really glad that they're doing something about it. When you do a constructor today, you need, if you have overridden another class or if you are extending another class, you need to call the super of that constructor in order to run all the code that the class that you extended will run before you can run your code. But in the future, you could have, like you see here, this positive big integer, which extends the big integer. We can check in the big integer here if we have a positive value, or else we will throw an exception. And if it's positive, then we can go in here and say that we want to run super and create a big integer. So it's a way of making either statements to check different values and so on before you actually run the super function of the particular constructor. So it's a really good addition, I think. And that was everything that was contained in this Java version 23. This was what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you learned something today. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave those in the comment section down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And I really hope to see you in the next video.